that's been doing local for the last 80 years. So now we're kind of helping them bring the mobile component to their local offering.
Great, thank you. Vishy?
My name is Vishy Gopalakrishnan. I'm with SAP. For those of you who know SAP, we've been in business for about 40 years. We focus traditionally on what we like to think of as systems of record within corporations. So whether it's your AP, your GL, your HR, etc. But over the last 2.5 years or so, we've expanded that to say, how do we go from helping companies manage systems of record to actually craft together systems of engagement. So that leverages mobile platforms, big data, and cloud. And so I'm part of the mobile solutions business at SAP. So we've been helping a lot of brands over the last several years, whether it's in mobile banking, whether it's in business to consumer applications in the retail, consumer goods space, and also importantly, which is our kind of history, helping companies internally optimize their processes, whether it's around field service, SFA, et cetera, using mobile applications.
Great, thank you.
And my name is Lee Clancy. I'm VP of Consumer Products for Trulia, a leading online marketplace for home buyers, home sellers, renters, and real estate professionals. We have a number of both consumer website as well as about 14 different mobile applications that help home buyers and sellers, as well as, say, renters, mortgage shoppers, and even real estate agents, make the most out of the entire sort of ecosystem around people looking to buy homes and find rentals for themselves.
Great. So the first question that I want to lead off with was actually inspired by a question posed to Bill Gurley. And I gave my panelists about a 5-minute heads up on this. I'll invite the audience to chime in at the end of the session as well. But the question I want to pose is the following. If we think about verticals, in addition to the ones that you're currently working in, which vertical, in your opinion, is poised to be disrupted by mobile and location within the next 2 to 3 years? Which vertical is poised to be disrupted by mobile and location within the next 2 to 3 years? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I could jump in mainly because the vertical that we're in, the real estate space.
And the only caveat was you can't choose your own.
Can't choose okay. No, I mean, I think just as a point of, literally in the last, say, 18 months, the amount of usage that we have on mobile as opposed to web has gone from, say, low single digits to, say, 35% of usage on weekends. And so I think it's just a matter of time before.
Okay, all right. Other verticals poised to be disrupted?
I don't know if it's disruptive, but probably some of the areas that we're seeing some very interesting applications come around, and it's probably not glamorous, but around disaster relief, development in kind of the third world, sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera. How do you leverage location to help agencies like, say, the World Food Program, when they're in the field, how do you make sure that all of the aid, the development resources that go into these kinds of organizations, how does it actually get to the people that it needs to? How do you make sure that when qualified people, whether it's organizations like Doctors Without Borders, et cetera, when you have a disaster, how do you triage the resources?
That is a great application, and it's really mission critical.
Absolutely, and like I said, it's not about making people buy more stuff, et cetera, but we are working with a lot of those kinds of agencies in terms of kind of taking what you do in terms of classic supply chain expertise and saying, okay, how do I then get the right set of whether it's the doctors, the clinical assistants, psychiatrists, et cetera, to help people deal with trauma. So
it's interesting, social plays a big role in that as well.
Right.
Yeah, very good, excellent. Other ideas? Yeah.
So I think that, there's every industry is going to have some kind of local component to it, and so everybody's going to be disrupted to a certain extent. However, us and kind of focusing on loyalty and working with a wide variety of retail verticals, everything from big box grocery to mom and pop sandwich shops, you get decent perspective. And one thing that seems to be coming up pretty often are quick service restaurants and ordering capabilities. And I think the way in which we kind of order foods, and specifically in high traffic times, lunch rushes, dinner rushes, et cetera, and how we manage that is going to be completely different in the next few years. And obviously there's already some pointed solutions out there that are doing that well today. But I think that's going to be pretty disruptive in the very near future.
And is it going to speed things up or make, improve order accuracy or both?
Yeah, I think it's going to be disruptive because it's from a consumer perspective, the way in which we're managing this today is pretty inefficient, and so there's a lot of opportunities to create a better user experience, which will drive user adoption, which will drive creating disruptive models, I believe.
Okay, great. Neil, location and mobile.
Yeah, I would say, similar to Chris, because we're working with so many different verticals, we see lots of opportunities across, and there's a few that pop out to us, particularly when, like Chris talked about, the ability to, we have brands with several hundred locations. When we're looking at how to optimize the customer experience, it's not just about the global view of that, but also how do we optimize locally? How do brands optimize locally for that experience? Because quite honestly, the experience in Des Moines, Iowa should be different than it would be in San Francisco for that interaction. And so I think what's really interesting is the opportunity for marketing platforms to take advantage of those feedback mechanisms and really optimize that.
That's a great example. That leads me to my next question. And by the way, I've tweeted a few slides that are relevant to our discussion. My Twitter handle is Phil_Hendricks. But the next one deals with this framework we've discussed called PEER, for personalizing, enabling, engaging, and rewarding. We've talked a little bit about rewarding, but help me understand, as you think about location especially, and ways in which it's being used by businesses to either personalize, enable, meaning removing friction, making things easier for the consumer, or engaging or rewarding, where do you see location contributing most across PEER?
I will jump in again, I guess. As far as our business, location can mean an awful lot of different things. And I think at conferences like this, you get a lot of talk, because it's cool really, around, hey, location is about how do we know where the user is at a given time, and how do we use the unique capabilities of a mobile device to enhance whatever experience you might be talking about. And clearly in real estate, location, that's always been the case. But I think in our particular business, location can mean lots of different things. It can be the content itself that you have, in the application. And frankly, we wouldn't have any product if it weren't for the, millions of listings that we have, all that are tied to a specific unique location. Also, it's about just the environment that a user might be experiencing your application, right? So location, a lot of times people think, okay, it's here and now right away, but for example, in our business, over 30% of people when they're moving are actually moving from one state to another. So it becomes, location in that context becomes, how do I find out more about a location where I'm not even standing, I'm not there right now, but what sources of data and insights can you bring to help that user, enable that customer to find out more about that location? And then the third piece I'd say is monetization, right? So how does the location, the fact that something that a user is doing either in a given location or about a given location, how does that open up new monetization opportunities? And for example, in our business, we've seen that we actually monetize higher on mobile than we do on the web. And it's precisely because our real estate agent customers really want to reach those users who are specifically looking in a specific location.
Okay, great examples, both enabling as well as engaging. Yes, Richard?
Yeah, so just kind of build on that. I think location, in the context of, whether it's personalization, engagement, rewards, etc., I think it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Because our experience working with brands, for example, a large supermarket chain in Europe, so location is just one of the vectors. There's a whole bunch of stuff that, people call it context aware, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like a much bigger equation than just, location. And so what kinds of things can you do? So if you're a shopper, so one of the things we've been doing with the supermarket chain is, you're a shopper, you happen to be in the grocery store, and if you signed up, if you already have one of those loyalty cards, and a lot of these large supermarket chains, if millions, if not tens of millions of, the loyalty club members. So I know your buying history. I know the kinds of things that you buy. I know the kinds of things that you're doing on my website, right? So how do I munge all of that together? And the fact that you're in my store, and oh, by the way, it's the store that you come to 15 times over the last 3 months. And I know what kinds of things you buy, what kinds of things you buy together. And so it's kind of from a marketing perspective, it's getting that kind of granular access to that data. And then, oh, by the way, trying to figure out what is the most appropriate engagement I can have with you. When you're at that store, depending on the time of day, and oh, by the way, also figuring out, do I have any perishable foods in the back of the store that I need to kind of get rid of? So trying to get to that level of kind of personalization, not just from the consumer, but also from that store manager standpoint.
So it's really customization.
Absolutely, right? So it's like trying to essentially get all of those variables right to the extent that you can.
This is a classic big data problem. We talked earlier today about Place IQ and other platforms, really munging a lot of this data and bringing it together and the like as well. But the optimization is quite a big task. It requires a unique platform. Others enable, engage, personalize, reward.
Yeah, so, obviously my business is all about loyalty cards and then rewarding consumers with personalized offers. I find it
Chris, is that process of loyalty and rewards, is it broken? Is it working well as it is? And how does your solution sort of improve this process?
Well, so I'll answer that in 2 parts. First of which is just kind of give you my take on kind of location, then I'll tell you why it's broken. So, when we go and work with these retailers, the way they think about location is the consumers, walking down the street, the consumers driving in their car. I want you to buzz their phone right now and give them an offer when they're going by competitor's place. And for some reason, everybody thinks about location as this real-time data set about this consumer. But the reality is we don't operate like that. As consumers, we're creatures of habits. And so the way that we look at data and specific location data is where have your paths been? Where do you go? And how do you get the relevant and personalized content to that consumer before they go and make that purchase on a Saturday that you know that they're probably going to be going near one of your locations. First of which is just making it relevant and getting to them ahead of the trip. And yes, loyalty programs are broken. I think that's why I kind of have a business here, is because they're wildly inefficient for consumers. They can't keep up with what the actual reward is. Most consumers do not want to provide personal data when they opt into these programs, which then takes the benefit of them down because you can't get targeting. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to make it easier for consumers and make it work well. You say, listen, you're 20 points away from this next threshold, which will get you XYZ reward in return. And, often today people opt to these programs because they just don't want to pay the highest price at the point of sale. It's not necessarily about the rewards they're getting for their behavior. So, I could riff on that forever. There's a lot of problems with loyalty, and a lot of people are doing it right, but there's a lot of traditional models that are pretty good.
Come back to a point you just made, but Neil, tell us about your business, and I'm curious especially how your clients are using location-based insights that your platform provides.
Absolutely. So, real quick, I think the part that I get most excited about is certainly when you look at location, there's all of the characteristics of a location that are publicly viewable and that are well understood and actually can be used across any number of platforms to pull in and provide context. What I get really excited about, though, is what our brands are doing today. So primarily with our brands, both large and small, when they're looking at and measuring and understanding better what's going on at the physical location of really their primary customer touch point, they're actually building out their own private database of characteristics of that venue. So things like, is it a mall location or is it freestanding? Is it a kiosk? Who's working on staff at that time? What are the hours? Who's a regional manager? There's a number of different sort of proprietary views of that location that when you combine that with all of the sort of publicly viewable and understood characteristics, becomes far more insightful for that brand when it comes to looking at any particular metric that they care about. And so that's really exciting, and it's something that is really building a lot of momentum within the brands that we work with.
So a couple of points. We've had companies like Aloha Lohar talk about the value of capturing and perhaps archiving consumers' histories. As we think about this vault of data that is generated and perhaps accumulated and possibly archived by consumers over time, what's the value proposition for consumers that would prompt them to share more of that data either with your companies or companies with whom you're working? It's clearly not a black and white privacy issue. What's the value proposition that, in your opinion, will encourage consumers to unlock, release that data, and share it with trusted business partners?
I mean, ultimately, I think if by doing so they get more value out of your product or application, that's the main driver. I mean, one example in our case is, as you know, just as Amazon over time has said, hey, people that looked at this book also were looking at these books, you can do the same thing with homes, with neighborhoods, with other things related to your real estate experience. And from that perspective, we do that, and we say, hey, you know, these are relevant recommendations or ways to personalize the experience based on that activity.
Are there any sensitivities or issues that come up that cause your consumers or your business pause?
Not as much as in some of the other, you know, mobile spaces right now. You know, a lot of the location aspects that we look at are user intent driven. So somebody is searching for a given home in a location. They're sending a lead to a specific agent in a given location. So a lot of it does come kind of like Google, where it comes directly from that consumer consciously making an action there, and then we use that to enhance their experience.
So let me jump back to Chris and others on this point. Everyone, I guess, is after the Holy Grail. Share with us your transaction data, not only by store, but across stores, right? So the mobile wallet and passbooks and other things really are after that. Where's the line, and how do you create a value proposition? Chris, you've got a lot of experience with this, encouraging, enabling consumers to share that data in ways that give you a lot of visibility into really their whole consumer behavior.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't have every POS transaction. If you have your loyalty card to Keyring, I can't track that. So let's just make sure everybody knows that. But you know, I think when it comes down to the original question, which is how do you get the consumer to provide this data? And you know, it really comes down to relevancy, right? Is it going to make the experience better? Am I going to save more money? Am I going to save more time? And are you going to use my data in the right way? Do I have your trust? Am I going to get spammed? Is this going to get sold to somebody else? So I think it's being extremely transparent on why you're asking for the data, and then two, how you're going to use that data. And if you can do both of those well, and then you can actually have some truly actionable things that come out of using that data. Okay, I got this offer because I provided that data. You can track it back to that, and you as a consumer understand that. Then you're going to gain their trust. But if you keep asking and asking and asking, but not doing anything with in return, which I think is what a lot of people are doing, because we've got this big data play. We've all got these huge databases, but we don't know what to do with them. That's the problem. So anyway, that's my perspective.
So I'm curious, from Vishy, Neil's perspectives, we've got other technologies on the horizon like NFC that are going to create even more location-specific data. So I'm curious how you see these technologies impacting location, and how you see businesses leveraging these data that are different, but even more abundant.
Well, I think you know, to Chris's point, you definitely build trust through relevance. And so to give you some examples of, you know, when we look at brands that are looking across, you know, hundreds or thousands of locations, the bare basic thing that they're trying to understand is where are my consumers? Where are those communities? How do they operate? How do they act? And is that a global view, or is that something smaller and so more local? And you know, one example is I've got a brand, pub and eatery with several hundred locations, and to their surprise, most of their customers like to engage with them on a local basis over Instagram. So when they engage with those customers, they're actually running Instagram campaigns. Things like take pictures of the menu items and we'll put them on the menu. And it's super relevant to them because they know that their audience is there, they know that they're willing to engage that way, and that builds the trust, I think, that Chris is talking about because of the relevance.
Okay, great example.
Just a different perspective. I think if you play this out in terms of, you know, more information about what we do, what we transact, what we buy, etc., becomes available. I think the crux of the problem is still, who owns the data, right? So any kind of federation sounds like a good idea, but try getting a brand and say a financial services company and a carrier to figure out how they do that. And that's why you're seeing kind of mobile payments, especially in North America, or especially in the US, for example, take a long time to come to fruition. There have been starts and stops. NFCs kind of had starts and stops. There's ISIS, where the carriers got together. Then there's MCX, where the retailers want to get together and try to control that payment infrastructure and what happens to the data. So I think, there has to be, something has to give there, because you can't have these silos of data which get in the way of providing that kind of seamless experience, relevance around that, and then also assurance to end consumers like you and I that, none of this data is being abused, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I see more silos coming up. And I think individual brands are all trying to do their best to create their own silo, because at the end of the day, they want to control that touch point, that engagement with that consumer, right? But I think we as individual consumers may be better served with an alternative approach.
So we've got just a few minutes left. If you've got a question, please raise your hand, come to the mic. But I wanted to pose one question to the panel here before we break. There was a great study just released by the CMO Council, and the conclusion was only 16% of companies surveyed have a strategy for using mobile as a channel for customer interaction, which I suspect is approximately right. Now given that, what advice would you have in terms of encouraging, enabling companies to integrate mobile and location more fully into their strategies? If that's where we are, what's the next step up the ladder for companies that either you own or companies you're working with? What advice would you have?
I mean, at the risk of sounding lean startup-y, I think bottom line is you just got to do it, start to get out there. I mean, a lot of what we did truly in the last 18 months was just getting on as many of the platforms that we, our customers, our consumers, and our agents are actually on. And in so doing, you just learn a great deal about that customer need and how you can better serve them.
I would just kind of latch on to that. It's, mobile is, and I hate to use the analogy, but I think it's very telling, it's like football. It's a full contact sport without the concussions, but you just have to start doing it. We've run into so many brands who try to figure out, the best strategy to, leverage mobile as a channel, right? And how do I do channel integration? I have bricks and mortar, I have .com, and they spent 6 months kind of trying to figure out the best kind of mousetrap, and the market has moved on. The brands have launched a bunch of different things. So, we call, let your strategy emerge from experience. You have to do some control pilots, lean startup-y, minimum viable product, get something out there. And I think where organizations struggle with culturally is the ability to then iterate very quickly. Because I think when you start leveraging mobile as a channel, you have to be ready for radical transparency, because it's going to expose a lot of things that you probably don't do well. And so you have to be ready to kind of, warts and all, ready to do that. And most large brands are not there yet.
And there are silos within organizations.
Yes,
as well.
exactly.
Yes.
One note on that also is I think as you look at what you're doing on mobile, don't underestimate your mobile website. So everyone gets really excited about apps in general, but your mobile website, for us, it's still a huge percentage of traffic because of search traffic, people just running searches on their phones, people getting emails that they then are checking that then take users into a mobile website. And obviously you got to get the roadblock up there to get people to get into apps, but it's amazing that once you start to do that, you realize how many parts of your mobile web experience are broken that you then have opportunities to optimize and get better engagement and higher metrics on, because you start to put yourself in the head of that user who maybe doesn't have your app but ends up ending up on all these sort of broken pages that you have on your website.
Okay. Chris, Neil?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. Just a couple of thoughts. One, it's, I feel like mobile right now is where social was 4 years ago. You go in and you're selling a retailer a social product, like what's social that's on a line item in our budget? And mobile is in the same place, right? So we're behind social. They have dedicated social teams. Now they're starting to have dedicated mobile teams. And of course, if you're going to go to this retailer and actually have something to offer, you have to have a location component to it, because it creates a whole relevancy of why they're even going to talk to you, and they want to have these one-to-one relationships. So if it was me and I was looking at the marketplace and I was wanting to create a service, I wouldn't be focused on so much of, well, what are retailers buying or what are they not? I'd focus on what services can we build and create right now that we don't necessarily need the retailer's buy-in, but are going to solve some pretty far-reaching consumer needs. And if you do that and you build out this really powerful local user base, the retailers and the consumer packaged goods companies will work with you. So focus on need first, and then I think the companies will find you.
And Chris would be happy to talk about those opportunities after our session. You get the last word here.
Yeah, so I think, for our brands, retailers across different verticals, mobile is local and local is mobile in their eyes, right? And so when we talk about being able to launch effective mobile strategies, I think if you can't measure it, you shouldn't be doing it. And a lot of brands that we're working with, their comfort level with launching mobile strategies and launching mobile campaigns really comes from their comfort level of understanding what's going on locally. And so we're trying to build the optics into local so that they can really launch strategies that not only are going to be effective and interesting and relevant to a consumer, but also measurable on the back end, so they really understand, okay, how are we building their brand at the local level? Because honestly, for a lot of these brands, and this is becoming more and more obvious, is that with the explosion of local, right, 500% year on year across our platform of local consumer interactions, local is defining, those interactions are defining the brand reputation. And I really believe that, and it's something that's going to grow and grow and grow. So you have to be effective, you have to launch effective strategies in mobile, and if you can't measure it, don't do it.
Great. We're out of time, but please join me in thanking the panelists. Great job, guys. Thank you. I'll close by mentioning again that I've done a lot of work with Mark at these conferences, so again, I'd like to thank him for putting this conference on. Very timely. It has been over the last 2.5 years, remains to be that way, and I think it will continue to be. I've also written a number of papers on location. If you're interested, again, contact me either on Twitter or elsewhere, and happy to share those with you as well. Thanks again. Enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. Great job.